So a little over a year ago, I made a video about this book, a journal written by the main six, or seven, I guess. And since then, I've crossed paths with this book, a journal written by the principals of Canterlot High. From this, I thought, genuinely, who cares? As much as this book wasn't that much of an essential read due to the fact that there's like barely any new information revealed about the characters or the lore, and a good chunk of it is literally just recaps of the movies, at least it was written by the main seven, right? In other words, chances are if you wanted to read this book, or you already find yourself enjoying these characters and wouldn't really mind if the book itself wasn't like a fantastic read since it was written by characters you already enjoy. That's why I gotta ask, what about this book? Are Principal Celestia and Vice Principal Luna really anybody's favorite characters? Or even in anyone's top 10 characters in Equestria Girls? Top 15? Top 20? Top 100? Probably not. But then I realized this whole rabbit hole goes a little deeper when you realize that there's toys based off these characters. Now, this hypothetical I'm about to present may be easier to imagine for some than others, but imagine you're the target demographic of the show. The actual target demographic of the show. And you find yourself in the toy aisle. Would you want an action figure and or doll of the principal character, especially if they have zero personality in the movies? For reference, the other toys released alongside this set in this wave were these. Don't ask why there's an Adagio figure released 2 years after Rainbow Rocks came out, and why, by that logic, Sonata and Aria were never made, but I digress. Wouldn't you rather much have literally any other ones than this? The only reason I could really think of anyone in the target demographic would be getting this is if they either really want to roleplay school stuff and specifically need a principal character, or if their parents just have deep pockets and buy them literally everything. I guess there is a much more reasonable answer if everything else on the shelf was sold out. And that leads us to this book, My Little Pony Equestria Girls Wonder Quilts Forever, The Diary of Celestia and Luna. What a title. I'm sure the main reason this was written was to be as a human counterpart to this journal, which is like written by Princess Celestia and Luna. And trust me, we'll get back to this at a much later date. But I do have a slight guess that on the business end of things, this book was written with half the thought as an attempt to characterize the principals a lot more to get kids to actually buy toys of the characters. The dates would seem to line up since this was released on the tail end of 2016, with the book being released pretty much as 2017 began. Or not, I don't know, it might just be coincidence for all I know. But either way, I hope that this does do a good job at characterizing the principals. And even if that wasn't the actual intention behind this book, let's see if this would have convinced a little girl version of me to actually buy this thing. Even for basement-dwelling neckbeard adult fans of the show like me, who do have disposable income, I don't think this would have been our first choice out of all this. Especially today, when it'll cost you an arm and a leg. Yeah, like, honestly, how bad must you have your priorities in life that you're even considering ordering something like this? Let alone at this price. 1 second. Okay then, before we open this package, I want to give a huge shout out to today's sponsor, the Everyday Earbuds by Raycon. After having used these for a while, I can tell you that Raycon's everyday earbuds are amazing. They start at just half the price of other premium audio brands, which is a huge bonus. Just like how cool this protective case is. I got mine with the sunset color for no particular reason, and there's lots of other cool colors to choose from as well. I've been using these for whenever I need to block out noises and lock in whenever I'm working on videos, such as the one you're watching right now. On top of their active noise cancellation, I really love how they have a 32-hour battery life. I also love how they never fall off from whenever I'm rocking my head out to some tunes or going out for a jog. So if you'd like to support this channel and get a pair of awesome earbuds while at it, go to buyraycon.com/F- to get 15% off of Raycon's best-selling everyday earbuds. Brought to you by Raycon. Anyways, what was I saying? Oh yeah, just like I attempted with this journal, I tried to look into some background information in order to set this scene, such as who actually wrote it, and unlike that one, the author of this one is actually listed on the cover. That's a start. However, aside from the myriad of Minions books she's written, such as these, I'm convinced that this lady is actually a ghost, judging by how there's literally no pictures of her online, nor any social media presence. Okay. It's a little odd how there's not much discussion about this book, so I suppose the best place to get info about this book, besides, well, inside of the book, would be the back of the book. So while I struggle to open this box, let me just read the back of it. Meet Celestia and Luna before they were ever in charge. It's Celestia's last year at Canterlot High before college, and she's determined to make a splash.
while Luna is trying to learn the ropes of her freshman year, as the whole school prepares to square off against Crystal Prep in the first annual friendship games. Both girls are getting really into it, until someone vandalizes Canterlot's precious Wondercold statue. Now the games are in jeopardy, and Celestia and Luna will have to figure out how to make peace. Otherwise, an escalating prank war with the Crystal Prep students could totally ruin their whole year. We'll circle back to that after going through the actual book, because I have some thoughts about that. For now, I just wanted to give it a read so that you guys have like a general idea of where this book is heading, just so you could brace yourselves for what's to come. But before we jump into the book itself, let me just think of some expectations of what should be included for me to consider it to be a good book. First of all, I'd hope that there's some conflict between Celestia and Luna, but like, okay, for example, take the freaking tell-all, right? Since this one was written like a magazine with no plot, there was no conflict at all, but this book is written to be like a linear story, therefore it sort of needs conflict in order for like plot to happen. But I'm more talking about conflict between Celestia and Luna. Not that I like seeing chaos among families. Wait, yes I do. But even if I theoretically didn't, I still do want to see some conflict between the two sisters, just to reflect the whole Nightmare Moon situation from the show. Perhaps in the form of Luna being jealous of Celestia for some reason. In a similar category, it would be cool to get some backstory to their rise to power. I'm not saying make the girls explicitly state they want to become principals when they're older, or to receive training to become principals, but it would be nice to see the two undergo some leadership slash teaching slash managing skills that would be required if they want to be a principal. Now, next up, this might be a bit general, but I do want to see a little bit of Easter eggs and references to the franchise. Granted, this might be a bit hard since it's a prequel that takes place before any of the actual characters we're familiar with were even born, but still. Similarly, I also want to see some world building. Maybe a mention of the Sugar Cube Corner, perhaps with Mr. and Mrs. Cake working there as teens or something. And finally, this may be a big ask, but maybe some mention about their parents, since in the show we never get any mention about Celestia and Luna's parents, or if they even have any. At least there's a cop-out for the show that we're talking about like magical unicorn princesses and stuff, but clearly, you don't have the same liberty in human form. So I do want to see how this book will tackle that, if at all. Other than that, my eyes and mind are open, just like this package now. Let's see what this could be, what this could possibly be. Oh wow, it's this thing. Who would have ever guessed? Now, the billion-dollar question is, do I open this or keep it in the package forever? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. Kind of like how we'll find out if this is a good book. This is My Little Pony Equestria Girls Wondercolds Forever, The Diary of Celestia and Luna. Seriously, what a title. Page 1. Diary? Wait, that's not an E. What's with this font? Anyways, after carefully dissecting what each of these letters are, and despite how difficult this font is to read, it's been deduced that this takes place in Celestia's last year of high school, and Luna's first year is just starting. And thus, they are keeping this diary together to preserve memories. Celestia then goes on to describe the school and how she's excited to take on the final year. There's honestly not much plot here, except that she describes her being in final year as
Canterlot High is even better this year than it was last. There's something really special about being a senior and ruling the school. It's just us. No one to look up to or worry if they think you're cool. We're the ones people talk about in the bathrooms or when they walk down the hall. I can't wait to make this last year really count. Which is a little odd. I mean, this takes place as the year is starting. Therefore, it's not like there's already people talking about her in bathrooms, meaning that this is based off some like stereotype and not experience. What? Why is that how she describes senior life to be? Is talking about your upperclassmen with others in the bathroom really that much of a thing? I'm sure we've got a lot of high schoolers watching this video right now. Let me know, do y'all talk about older kids in the bathroom for the sole reason being that they're seniors? Or do you spend any of your free time at all, for that matter, talking about them in the bathroom or not? Then we get to Luna's first entry, and she immediately starts off by saying it's been weeks since Celestia's entry already, then elaborating that it's been a month. I don't know why she previously described it as weeks, then later said month. Plot-wise, it's a little dumb how Celestia nor Luna wrote in this thing for like a whole month, despite how hyped they seem to be at the beginning. But from a literary standpoint, I get it, since this book is supposed to span the entire school year, and I guess we gotta cut some corners here and there to get to the fun stuff. It's just a little stupid how she goes on to say that she's more on the introverted side. I guess I can be just a tiny bit more introverted than Celestia. My old guidance counselor taught me that word, and it just means that it's not as easy for me to be talkative or outgoing, at least not at first. I don't know if it's something about being Celestia's little sister or what, but the first week I was so nervous at Canterlot High. But it's dumb because that factor doesn't really come up in the story at all, hence being irrelevant information, and If it were relevant, they could have just shown it through her actions instead of her just writing everything. In fact, without getting too ahead of ourselves, this entire entry as a whole is kind of irrelevant. She brings up how she's made friends with 2 girls in her grade named Seasons and Galaxy. We could take shots and say that Seasons and Galaxy are the most generic names imaginable and sounds like a parody of what people think pony names would sound like. However, I think that there actually is something a bit more clever going on here, but we'll come back to that later. Just remind me because I might forget. But for now, the reason I say it's irrelevant is because Luna brings up these girls and how they're trying to get her to audition for a musical and giving us details about this musical, yet this musical is not brought up in the entire book ever again. So the book then gets to the actual point when it starts talking about the first annual friendship games they're doing with Crystal Prep Academy. And it's kind of cool how it said that even back then, Cinch was still the principal of that school. Bro must be ancient, but it is pretty cool seeing like a tie to the actual movies. Too bad all we get for the Canterlot High principal is somebody who just goes by Principal Potts. Anyways, while this is going on, there's an election for class president that Celestia runs for, but she's nervous because there's this other popular kid, Hurricane, who's running. It was interesting how Luna tries helping Celestia rehearse stuff for her candidacy, and Celestia pays her back by crashing out at her. I thought it was cool seeing a more realistic dynamic like this between family members, even though making Luna be the one to crash out would have lined up way better with the show, but alright. Anywho, surprise, surprise, Celestia wins class president. Good job. But more importantly, it's revealed that there's 4 years in this school. I sure do hope that there's nothing that completely contradicts that in the series or anything along those lines later. But speaking of the passage of time, it's quite a wonder how the next entry begins with Luna saying that there's been a month of class presidency preparation. Remember that there was already a month between the starting of the book and the first mention of there being a school election, meaning that at least 2 months have already passed when it feels like this book is just starting. It really reads like the ghost who actually wrote this book wanted to speedrun through the school year to get her paycheck as quickly as possible. Fair enough, that's not really what I'm too concerned for now. What I am concerned about is how in this page, it says ice cream, then it says ice cream shop with a hyphen in between. I thought this was quite arbitrary, but apparently that's an actual grammar rule, even though according to this guy that was going out of style even in 2007, and Google's generative AI says ice cream is a standard open compound, therefore you shouldn't hyphenate it. So I'm not really sure what this book that came out a few months shy of an entire decade since it was going out of style was doing, hyphenating such a thing. How arbitrary, especially when this part of the book is canonically written by a 13-year-old. I doubt we actually needed the hyphen by any metric imaginable here, but go off. Sorry, I'm an English major. I tend to get fixated on stuff like this. Her new role as class president involves having this meeting with the class president and principal of Crystal Prep Academy. And it's quite interesting how they describe her here.
Principal Cinch is a stern-looking woman with a pale turquoise skin and purple hair. She must be new at Crystal Prep because she seems really young. She looks like she's barely older than me. Her dress shirt was buttoned all the way up, and she has a plump mole on her left cheek. Her voice is practically 3 octaves lower than Principal Potts's, and her face is twisted like she just kissed a lemon.
I like how, yes, she's an evil woman in the movie and we're not supposed to like her, but like, as this book is describing, she's new to the profession here. Yet the main thing they do is insult her appearance. She didn't even do anything wrong yet, man. Let her breathe. I especially didn't like this line where she describes her voice as being 3 octaves lower than the Canterlot High principal, since, does this book even know what an octave is? Okay, so basically what an octave is let's just grab a note here. Notice how this and are 2 different notes. There's a jump there, right? Right. But then this note is like this. It's the same note, but except like higher. That's like the same note, because if there were different notes, it would sound different. Like notice how you can. There's 2 distinct notes there, right? But that's the same note. It's the same note, right? So basically, if these 2 characters' voices are 3 octaves from each other, that means because that's 1 octave up, that's 2 octaves up, that's 3 octaves up. So that means that Principal Potts' voice would be up here, and Principal Cinch's voice would be down here. I mean, I guess that's kind of like a reasonable note for a guy's voice to be. And sure, I guess that you can say that Principal Cinch has a deeper voice. But that would mean that Principal Potts' voice would be all the way up here. Oh, so I'm just saying that entire comparison is stupid. That's why you don't make music references if you don't know anything about music theory. This is kind of dumb because even for males and females, the average pitch difference is not even a full octave. Come on, man. I will give it some leeway based on the fact that it's canonically a high schooler writing this, but you're on thin ice. Anyways, the friendship games are established to be happening with this newspaper, the Canterlot Gazette, publishing an article about it. This is one of the only illustrations actually relevant to the story in the entire book, by the way. I don't know if we can exactly count this one since it's just text, but we'll take what we can get for now. It's kind of cool how Celestia notes that her parents were reading it. We don't ever get any explanation on what they are like, but at least that's sort of neat. Anyways, the excitement for the games don't last long, since it turns out the Wonder Colt statue at school has been painted bright purple with blue and purple streamers thrown onto trees. This seemed to piss off, quote, hundreds of Canterlot High students, with them standing out on the lawn, staring at it, and blaming the Crystal Prep kids for being responsible for this. And I like how hundreds could mean anywhere from 200 to 900. And the imagery of at least 200 kids just standing around and looking at a statue instead of going to class without somehow overcrowding the lawn is pretty funny. I don't know, it's just an odd sentence. What's a cool sentence though is how Luna says,
"Diary, I can't believe them. This is horrible. As soon as I saw what they did to the Wonder Colt, our Wonder Colt, I wanted to march over to Crystal Prep and tell them that they didn't know anything about friendship or kindness or generosity."
The mention of 3-ish elements of harmony is kind of fire. It makes sense how Princess Luna is a princess, so she wouldn't know about the elements that make up friendship. So it was cool seeing the human Luna also demonstrate that. Good job. It would have made more sense for this stuff come out of Celestia, but like I said, we'll take what we can get for now. It's kind of funny how everyone in the school starts crashing out and getting mad at Crystal Prep for allegedly being behind all this. But like, this is all over streamers? That's not even a huge deal. Ali's throwing toilet paper all over, that would have been horrid, especially if it rains right after. I guess depending on the type of streamers they threw, it could have the same effect. But when I looked up wet streamers to look up if this is the case, the only results I got were this weird fishing thing that I can't make heads or tails of. So that's nice. It's funny how I could have probably gone my entire life without ever seeing this object or knowing what it is, but my attempt to look up what streamers look like when they are wet has gotten me wet streamer pilled. What's really dumb about this though is how Celestia notes that she thinks her hands are permanently purple from the result of cleaning the statue because the paint that they used to vandalize the statue was really effective. I thought this was really stupid because Principal Potts calls Principal Cinch, who denies the Crystal Prep students were responsible for this. And the search for the culprit behind this ends there. That within itself would have been fine by me because I thought it was a pretty funny prank, and getting away with pranks like that is like really funny. But the reason I say this is stupid is because Celestia notes,
"The paint the Crystal Prep kids used was really hard to get off, so he had to scrub down the marble for hours. The Wonder Colt is still a little weird looking. The white marble is kind of pinkish purple now. Leo, one of the janitors, told us it might fade with sunshine and rain."
So they literally have a janitor, Leo, who doesn't help with cleaning the mess, aka his job. Aside from giving unsure information like, it might fade with sunshine and rain. If they have a janitor, why are they forcing a poor teenager to clean all this up? At least we get not only one, but 2 super high effort purple shifted edits of the statue. Once again, let's just take what we can get. Anyways, the next big plot point is how it turns out that somebody from CHS went ahead and took revenge by throwing blue and gold streamers over Crystal Prep's trees and painting a Wonder Colt horseshoe in their courtyard and stealing a Shadow Bolt statue, which pretty much causes the friendship games to get cancelled altogether. Then Celestia gets really sad because she was really looking forward to the games, and I thought the wording here was pretty funny.
Blue and gold streamers were still hanging some of the trees.
Don't you mean still hanging on some of the trees?
Principal Potts has told us there will be a cleanup day soon when a bunch of Canterlot High students will go to Crystal Prep to take down the streamers. I hope that makes things better, or at least a little bit, if only for Celestia's sake.
I know the context is very different, but it was pretty reminiscent of how ponies use Celestia's name in expressions such as this.
I can't just send her off to Celestia knows where without thinking it through.
I was not aware that I was an expression.
Divorced from the context of what's going on, for Celestia's sake sounds like another one of those Celestia expressions. But speaking of which, Canterlot Gazette starts painting headlines like this, which also misquotes things she said and also besmirches Canterlot High as an evil school. So essentially, Celestia 1. Got something she was looking forward to a lot for months canceled. 2. Has the town's newspaper lie about what she said. 3. Has her school, a huge source of her overall pride as a person, be painted as a place full of liars and thieves. 4. In public, overhears random adults talk about how Canterlot High is an awful school and how they'd never send their kids there. 5. Learns that applications for the expensive private school are rising in light of this. 6. Yet still has to keep a happy face and smile through all this in front of her classmates because she's class president. 7. And to top it all off, her own dad, who's supposed to be the protector of the family, can't do anything about the situation. Well, that sucks. Good thing this list is 5 shy of 13. Otherwise, Celestia might have had no choice but to do something really stupid, like I'm probably gonna do as soon as this video is over because this girl I'm talking to keeps leaving me on red. In my Rainbow Rocks retrospective, I said the holiday comic may have been the most depressing My Little Pony media out there to my knowledge so far, but this is definitely a contender for second place. Anyways, even though this chain of events is actually kind of depressing, I actually like how this isn't filler and passages like this.
Wendy was sitting right next to me and she must have seen the tears in my eyes. Canceling the friendship games? What would happen to all our hard work? What would we do with the uniforms that we'd made? And what about all those hours that the team had spent training? And I don't even want to think about the headline in the Canterlot Gazette. Dear Diary, it's me again. I can't stop looking at the clock. I'm writing this entry in Miss Thunderstruck's science class. It's almost the end of the school day, and as far as I know, no one has come forward and said they were the one who took the Shadow Bolt. I'm hoping that they will, that maybe they're just waiting until the last minute. If the friendship games are cancelled, I don't even want to think about it.
Actually expand on Celestia's emotions and inner world, which is what a book like this should really focus on, in my opinion. Parts like this actually make this feel like Celestia is an actual person writing this. But there's also other passages that I'll make careful note of that's the opposite of this. I just wanted to point this out so we can actually contrast what this book gets really good and what it doesn't do really good later. Still, this next part pisses me off. Celestia and Luna decide to take matters into their own hands to find out who's responsible for stealing Crystal Prep's statue so they can return it and maybe restore their school's reputation. Why this pisses me off is because earlier, Luna says they've launched an investigation to find the culprit behind the crime and talk to as many people as they could in page 60. But only now are they getting to ask Hurricane if he knows anything in page 70 when you'd expect him to be like the first suspect you'd go to, judging by how he's crashed out the hardest while trying to form a cult. It's one thing if they were too intimidated to talk to him since he's like popular and possibly a bit arrogant from that, and because he was like the only other named candidate who was running against Celestia for class president. You'd think he might have motives to like rob Celestia of her moment, and perhaps they were scared of confrontation, that's why they were putting it off for a while, but nope. They just straight up go and ask him. Fantastic. It gets even better because he has an alibi, and to test his alibi, they go ask his brother, Ocean Wave, who says Hurricane was with him the whole night of the incident. Because family members never cover each other up in crime, right? Still, I do like this part with Luna talking about how she was stalking Hurricane to look for clues just for this to happen.
P.S. Toward the end of the day, Hurricane caught me following him around the track. He asked me what I was doing, and I just ran away. He must think I have a crush on him now.
I thought that was pretty cute, and if this book focused a bit more on interactions like that rather than some grand mystery that you'd be able to find in literally any other random kids book, this entire book would have had a lot more impact. But we'll come back to the mystery after this whole subplot involving a fundraiser.
Dear Diary, I've been so busy trying to figure out who took the Shadow Bolt. I haven't been doing as much as I can as president. Today, I had a meeting with Principal Potts and the leadership committee to talk about different events that are coming up. We're going to have a big party to help raise money for the library. The librarians want to buy new books and even put in a reading area with couches and chairs for students to relax after school. We're hoping that the whole town comes to the party to support us.
They used to have actual librarians instead of literally just Shirley having to teach classes and be the sole librarian. Other than that, a point I made in the retrospective of the first Equestria Girls movie was asking why the heck the library in this random high school is unreasonably gigantic. I thought this fundraiser scene for the library might have actually been an attempt to answer that. That this fundraiser exceeds expectations and they're able to make huge renovations to the library. Not like the library in the school being like big is a make or break detail for my enjoyment of the movie. And not like I was expecting an actual answer from this book, but I was like, okay, I hear you. Let's see where we're going, right? Let's see where this is going. Well, all we get is this filler explaining what rock candy is.
Wendy and a dozen of our friends agreed to bake everything for the party. We're going to have every type of sweet you could imagine. Brownies, cupcakes, cakes, cookies, fondue. Wendy said she knows how to make rock candy, which is just sugar that looks like giant crystals on a stick. We're going to sell each one for $1.
I think we all know what rock candy is. Marshmallow fought a giant one, remember? This was obviously done just to fill up the page, and a similar thing was done with the word introverted from the beginning of the book. And like I said earlier, like, I don't think Luna's even been giving any necessarily introverted vibes from the story so far. My point is, this book says it, but it doesn't really show it. Therefore, this is just redundant filler that was put out here because there was nothing else much to fill these pages with, such as like progression to the actual plot. Because if we actually progressed with the plot, instead of doing redundant filler, this book would be like 3 pages long. For example, right after this, they talk about how the Friendship Games team had to give their equipment back because the games were canceled. And we get irrelevant details such as,
Hi, Diary. So today was a big day. Celestia and I waited by the gym for the Friendship Games team. At about 4 o'clock, they all came walking up to the shed out back, carrying the last of their equipment. Lavender, a girl with bright purple hair, returned a bow and a quiver of arrows. Autumn Frost gave back some weights he'd been using.
what's it matter what her hair color and specific sports equipment for? Not to mention,
The whole time, I was looking for clues. Could anyone on the team have taken the Shadowbolt statue? Had we been silly for not talking to them sooner? Anyone could be a suspect.
if you didn't investigate anyone on the team that you were working very closely with at all, then who the heck did you even investigate at the point where you said you talked to everyone that you possibly could? Anyways, back to the library fundraiser subplot. It starts off by saying,
Dear Diary, everything was perfect for the fundraiser today. Luna and I worked all morning setting up tables and chairs on the lawn in front of Canterlot High.
but then goes on to say,
But after about an hour, I noticed something strange. We'd put up posters all around town and had even put an invitation in the Canterlot Gazette. But there were only CHS students and parents at the party. No one else from town had come to support our school. I told Luna what was happening and she looked around. A shocked expression on her face. You're right, she said. The whole day we waited, but no one from town came to CHS. When the party was over, we'd only made a couple $100. It wasn't half of what we needed to get all the books the librarians wanted. Luna tried to cheer me up, but I feel miserable.
which, first of all, I thought you said everything was perfect. If it meant that everything started off perfect or the planning was perfect, that would have made sense, but like, this is written pretty clunkily. And I'm sure if that's what this book meant, it would have said so. Second of all, since the fundraiser was a failure, the whole mystery of why the school's library is gigantic still goes unsolved. What does go solved is the big mystery of who stole the Shadowbolt statue. Woo! Because of any detective work on Celestia and Luna's part? No, not really. The only real clue they get is when Luna's in the bathroom and...
Diary, I have big news. Something huge happened today. For the last week, Celestia and I have been really stumped. We haven't given up looking for the Shadowbolt, but we've come pretty close.
I just realized that sentence makes no sense. Instead of but, that should be and.
Then just last period, I was in the bathroom during study hall. I just closed the stall door when 2 girls walked in. They must not have noticed me in there because they started chatting about Hurricane. He's so cute, one of the girls said. I stood behind him in line at the vending machine yesterday. I swear he smiled at me. They were older than me, probably juniors. I could tell by the way they talked. Then the other girl said excitedly, he'd be so impressed if he knew. She was about to say more, but her friend said, shh, really loudly. She told her not to talk about it at school. She said it was too risky. Then the girls washed their hands and left. I stayed in the stall until I was sure they were gone. Now there's only one problem. ... I didn't get a good look at them. I tried to see through the crack in the stall door, but I couldn't really. I did get a great look at their shoes though. One girl had on a pair of pink high tops, the other girl was wearing black flats with a shiny buckle on the toe. It's not a lot to go on, but it's something. I'm just happy we have our first real clue, Detective Luna.
which doesn't really prove anything, but this random kid who we'll just call Mr. Snitch relays to Principal Potts that he saw 2 girls bury something in the forest, but they bullied him into not snitching. Yet he does here. Conveniently, only after Luna notices there being 2 girls acting suspicious in specific. What impeccable timing. But speaking of snitches, Principal Potts is also a snitch. So this guy who's scared for his safety his whole life begs her not to tell anybody, but then she invites Celestia into the office and forces him to tell her everything that happened. This is even dumber when technically this should really be none of Celestia's business in the first place. And this is something that the adults should have worked behind the scenes on. It seems a little irresponsible to me to drag a student into this, but go off, queen. Not unlike how the gun aimed at my head might go off if she doesn't respond to my texts. Anyways, now that they have the suspicion that the 2 girls who were burying something are the same 2 girls Luna overheard, they start a rumor around the school about how there's a gem worth thousands of dollars hidden in the statue, since supposedly the woods are too big to find where it's buried without being led to it. So they hope that the girls would hear the rumor and that they would go back and dig it up so that they can be followed back to where it was buried. Yeah, no, this part's just really dumb. Even if the two culprits fell for this, what are the chances anyone would see them actually going into the woods if this forest is as big as they make it out to be? Unless if you have like the entire perimeter of this gigantic forest guarded by people at all times. That's not suspicious. Let alone during a time where somebody would see this actually happening. Was the plan to have like 24/7 surveillance around the whole perimeter of this forest? I guess the author just wanted to finish this book and get paid because the girls just so happened to enter the forest right in front of where Celestia and Luna are doing a stakeout during lunchtime and school hours. That's dumb. What else is dumb is the entire resolution.
We wanted Hurricane to think we were cool. The girl with the dress shoes said she had a poofy green hair.
Why is that relevant information here?
We found out her name was Milestone, and both she and her friend were juniors. He kept talking about how someone needed to get back at Crystal Prep for what they did to the Wondercold. We both had a crush on him ever since 5th grade, so we thought if we stole the Shadow Bolt, he would like us, or notice us at least. Her friend, a redheaded girl named Willow, frowned. We went to Crystal Prep that night and threw streamers in all the trees, Willow told us. We painted a big yellow horseshoe on their courtyard. Then we broke in the front door and stole the Shadow Bolt from its pedestal in the main hall. It was heavy, though, and it took more effort to carry it than we thought it would.
Two young girls being responsible for all that is impressive. And perhaps they have a future in being intelligence agency spies. Maybe these are the girls that are always in my walls and gang stalking me. Though what isn't impressive is how they go on to say,
she went on with the story, telling us how they were trying to carry it down the street when they dropped it. It smashed into 2 pieces. They knew they were in trouble then. They'd only meant to take it for a few days to teach Crystal Prep a lesson for playing a prank on her school. They always meant to return it, but now that it was broken into bits, they couldn't. They buried the pieces in the woods behind Canterlot High. They hoped at some point people would just forget about it. But when they heard about the ruby that was inside it, they wanted to check if the rumors were true.
The statue got broken anyway? Why would they fall for the rumor that there was a gemstone hidden in it then? That makes perfect sense.
The only thing I like about this part is how it almost makes Celestia cry.
Dear Diary, it was so hard to tell Principal Potts what had happened. I wasn't even the one who took the Shadow Bolt, and I was nearly in tears when we walked into her office. She wanted to find it as badly as I had, and now there was no hope of getting it back.
And people who are usually happier than me crying brings me unmeasurable joy. It also makes me happy how the two culprit girls also start crying.
Willow and Milestone sat down on the chairs in front of her desk. They slowly told the story, and Milestone started crying when they got to the part where they dropped the statue and broke it.
But I'm not a huge fan of the succeeding events.
After watching the whole thing, Luna and I agreed. Principal Potts is the kindest, fairest principal we could ever imagine. She made sure the girls knew they had done something wrong, but she was also really kind to them. She gave them hugs when they cried. She said she understood that they were sorry.
I bet that if somebody showed me basic kindness like so, I wouldn't be such a mess. Anyways, they fixed the statue and give it back to Cinch.
I was sure that Principal Cinch would get angry or yell, but when she heard the statue was broken, she just looked really sad. I was given that statue when I became principal here. It was a gift from the students, she said. You can't imagine how upsetting this has been.
I almost feel bad for her. Actually, no, never mind. That implies that I have any desire to be empathetic to anyone still. But because they patched things up, they decide to put the games back on, and Celestia describes how practice went. And during the scene, I'm honestly gonna have to ask, who cares? Let me just read this part and you be the judge.
Luna went first. She was great. She was way faster than most kids, and she climbed the wall easily. But the next 2 team members had a harder time. Waterfall, a junior with freckles and striped red hair, kept falling. After the 4th time he hit the ground, he gave up and walked off. Then a freshman named Sherbert Burst couldn't get even 1 foot up on the wall. She said the rocks hurt her hands. They're practicing all afternoon and night the next few days, but will Waterfall really be able to climb the rock wall? Will Luna learn how to shoot a bow and arrow? I really hope so, Celestia.
Does it seriously matter what these characters look like and what year of school they're in? That reads like filler, and while knowing what kind of specific obstacles that these characters are struggling or excelling in or whatever is pretty interesting to see on the screen. For example, Friendship Games, the movie, was pretty captivating in my opinion. But seeing this all in text is sort of meaningless and super exchangeable with literally any other description of the character or the game. For example, if you just take this part, and we switched out the colors and style and name and grade of the character and the game, literally nothing is fundamentally changed. That's why I kept saying earlier that this book would have been way better if it concentrated more on Celestia and Luna's inner monologue and thoughts, since that wouldn't have been as easily interchangeable. Anywho, if you've seen Friendship Games, we know that CHS has never won any of the games, and this one is no different. Well, kind of. They reach a tie and Celestia decides to give the trophy over to Crystal Prep as a token of friendship. It is kind of sad how this is technically Crystal Prep's first win for their undefeated winning streak. Yet Cinch lets the legacy of that turn into something to build a reputation over rather than how it was originally a sign of friendship.
We always win. I'll be honest. It doesn't matter whether or not Crystal Prep wins or loses. The important thing is that we are expected to win because Crystal Prep has a reputation. My reputation that is responsible for everything we have here.
Especially with how hopeful her story is left here.
Dear Diary, as soon as Principal Cinch saw the statue again, she was a different person. She seemed happier, warmer, and so much kinder than before. I'd spent hours after school repairing the statue with Miss Thunderstruck, and it was worth it. Cinch even agreed to let us have the friendship games again. Principal Cinch has put the crystal shadow bolt back on its pedestal in the main hall, where everyone can see it. If you look very closely, you might notice the tiny crack. I've heard from some people that she's smiling a bit more than usual.
What else is different is how the friendship games is constantly referred to as being annual when the movie says it's every 4 years.
Since the games only happen every 4 years.
Well, the book actually talks about this. I'm not entirely sure what the purpose of this was when they could have just initially made it every 4 years, since that wouldn't have even been arbitrary since the election cycle and the Olympics happen in a 4-year increment. I think this was just something the author added for filler purposes. But to look on the positive side, it is cool seeing how things came to be like this, since obviously events and things, they go through changes as it goes on. Anyways, this book comes to a close with Canterlot High's reputation being restored over town, and
The best part is the 2 Crystal Prep boys who'd painted our Wonder Colt came forward and confessed. They said they just felt too guilty, especially after we gave the trophy to Crystal Prep. Principal Potts decided that she wouldn't ask that they be punished if they volunteered this weekend.
that was easy. I forgot that was even a thing that happened. Speaking of things happening, the book ends with Celestia writing her graduation speech, which is, it's very sappy, but it is pretty sweet.
Now all I have to worry about is finishing up classes and my speech for graduation. I already started writing it. It makes me sad thinking of saying goodbye to everyone. So I'm not going to. Instead, I'm going to say see you soon, because just like our friends who went to Crystal Prep, I know our paths will cross again at college, or after college, or maybe after that. I hope that wherever I go and whatever I do, I'll be able to come back to Canterlot High someday. Maybe I could be a teacher or a coach. Maybe I could work in the science department like Miss Thunderstruck. Maybe I could even be principal. That probably sounds crazy, but a girl can dream, can't she? Celestia.
First of all, like I said earlier, I think one of the reasons, or at least a factor this book was written, was to characterize the principals a bit more. Since admittedly, just like the princesses in the actual show, they have zero personality. But at least with the princesses, they get a pass since every girl out there likes princess stuff, surely. I'm sure it doesn't even matter that they don't even appear in the show that much, since they're always there in marketing, and these toys probably sold like hotcakes. But you can't really apply the same logic / teeth to the principals. So let's evaluate and see if they actually did a good job. I'm not sure they did. In fact, give me a sec, it's really hot in this room. Okay. Okay. In fact, I'm not sure why this was even written to be like a journal. Honestly, I thought the main weakness of this replica journal being a replica journal is the fact that it's a replica journal. If it was titled something like Celestia and Luna's Friendship Games Escapade, and it was written in third person like a regular novel, it would have made much more sense, especially when it brought up those passages where they go off to describe who's competing in the games and like in such detail. Why the Smurf would a person writing a journal like this even care to note all that? This is her final year of attending a school she loves all so much. Shouldn't more of the writing be about interactions and inner monologues instead of irrelevant descriptions on random people with no bearing to the actual plot? If this was written in third person like an average novel, this wouldn't have really been a problem. But because it was written in a journal / diary format, I wish it would have really played to its strengths. But speaking of irrelevant characters with zero bearing on the plot, this book contains some confusing names. How am I supposed to tell Bartley away from Lavender, away from Milestone, away from Waterfall, away from Willow? I think these are pretty generic names, and it's what somebody who doesn't exactly know how pony names would work would think pony names would work. But honestly, that doesn't really matter since, like I said, these guys have so little to no impact to the actual plot. The only characters that really matter to the story are the ones I mentioned, like Hurricane, who's the popular kid, and Principal Potts, who is the principal. At least Hurricane's name is repeated a lot, and he's actually integral to the plot, and Principal Potts' name has the word principal in it, so it's not too hard to remember what her role is. But even if you read this book like a dozen times, right, and I proceed to put a cute little machine to your head and quiz you on which of the following characters is the one with striped red hair, promising to activate this cute little contraption if you get it wrong, I doubt the survival rate would exceed 0%. However, because I am a generous king, I can see actual lore-related reasons for their names being super generic. I mean, I'm speaking more about the characters Galaxy, Seasons, and Joyful. Obviously, these are very basic words, but then again, so are Celestia and Luna. So perhaps further on in the past in this universe, people had more generic and basic names that cover up an entire basic concept, with later generation ponies having more specific names. For example, we needed the name / cutie mark Celestia and Luna for the day and night cycle to exist, and from that is how we get names like Sunset Shimmer and Twilight Sparkle, because those relate to more basic names formed in the past. For example, I mean, let me just take something random from my desk. Lego Lisa Simpson in a pink dress, right? In order for Lego Lisa Simpson in a pink dress to exist, what must exist first? Well, first of all, Lisa Simpson, Lego, and pink dresses. In order for these things to exist, let's just go with Lisa Simpson. In order for Lisa Simpson to exist, the show The Simpsons must exist. In order for the show The Simpsons to exist, animation needs to exist. And in order for animation to exist, something to broadcast it like a TV needs to exist. So if we apply the same concept to names, current generation we have Lego Lisa Simpson wearing a pink dress, whereas in the past we would have had to have all the other things before this existed. And we can branch that off into like Lego. In order for Lego to exist, we need plastic. In order for plastic to exist, we need factories. In order for pink dresses to exist, we need fabric, and for you get what I mean. I'm just saying that the further we go back on an item, the more vague and broad the thing that makes up the item becomes. So if we take the same logic to the discovery of names in this world, since names in this universe are mostly just normal adjectives and nouns instead of normal human names, I think this actually makes sense. For example, like I said, there's a character named Joyful, and I think because we have names like that cover up the entire concept of joyful, that's how we get ponies with like names like Bright Smile, for example. So, good job. My mind is actually blown, or at least until we look at the names of the ancient ponies in the actual show, and this doesn't really apply to them, but let's just take what we can get. One character that did actually stick out to me was Windy Winters. Celestia describes her appearance as having long red hair and freckles. I couldn't help but notice how that's kind of similar to Windy Whistles, or at least when she was younger and her hair was longer. But I think when she was young, she didn't have freckles, so that kind of falls apart.
But still, Celestia says that she's the captain of the soccer team, which would be super poetic since her theoretical daughter is also the captain of the soccer team.
Rainbow Dash? She's the captain of like every team at Canterlot High.
This seems like a cool detail if it was intentional, like a slight wink wink nudge nudge. Plus, the names not being an exact match is fine since we've seen evidence of characters changing their names once they're married or something along those lines.
But isn't your name Mrs. Cake?
Not always. Back when I was Chiffon Swirl, I had no idea what I was supposed to do.
So, I buy it. Also, I found this one fan art of the character based on that brief description of her appearance, which is kind of neat. I like how one of the main points in this description is that this artist struggled with reading the cursive font as well. I'm glad to know that I'm not alone on that. Anyways,
that's when I realized instead of giving these characters generic names, the author could have really just used names of parent characters since they're probably closer in age to human Celestia and Luna anyway. Maybe that would have been a little too fan servicey and the average person reading this wouldn't have even gotten it, but like, it would have been clever. Then again, it could have also been a bit ridiculous for the people the main characters in the story interact with just so happen to be the future parents of future main characters. But on that note, you're probably wondering if there are any other characters that appear in the show that also get a mention in this book. Well, there's Raycon, like I mentioned, who shares the same name as one of the founders of Equestria. I don't know if these characters were intentionally supposed to be the same character or not, or if they just happened to share the same generic name, but it's pretty smart if it was, since obviously this guy would have been around when Celestia was younger. But then again, by that logic, I wonder where the rest of the founders would have been. It would have been cool if they were all student council members or something like that. Then again, if your name is literally Puddinghead, I doubt you'd make it very far in high school, let alone become a student council member. You're just gonna get bullied. Though, back to Raycon. The fact that he's depicted as being short-tempered with a militaristic style of speech in the show.
All I want to know is why the Earth ponies are hogging all the food. For the 100th time, it's not us. We're not making it snow. It must be the unicorns.
Would line up with the way he was angrily rallying up his classmates to get revenge on Crystal Prep. But speaking of which, there's also a Sherbert Burst on the Friendship Games team, meaning that she's an athlete, which would line up with the in-universe Wonderbolt author of this book, also named Sherbert Burst.
I think it's fair to say that those two are the same characters, seeing how some characters in the Wonder Cold sports teams are part of the Wonder Bolts as well. There's also a certain Crescent Moon mentioned. Well, that's also one of the billion names for this pony, even if this individual is referred to as female in the book. So I'm not sure if this counts as the same character or different characters altogether, since it's not like Crescent Moon is this pony's only name. Or what? Or I don't know. Perhaps I solved the whole season 1 character is trans riddle. Other than that, there's Leo the janitor, who shares the same name as this Leo, who is a king. Obviously, these aren't the same character, but the My Little Pony wiki considers them the same, which is stupid. However, what I find funny about that is how I've seen depictions of a theoretical Equestria Girls Discord being relegated to the role of a janitor as well. And if this was the same Leo, that would imply that no matter how powerful you are in the pony dimension, if you're not a pony, you end up as a janitor in the human world by default. Anyways, the text aside, let's talk about the images in this book. Something that demands your attention since it's visual and big and takes up a lot of space on the pages are these pictures. It's kind of uncanny how these are locations that we're so used to seeing with characters on them that it's almost liminal space-like and feels pretty ominous. Obviously, this wouldn't have been the author's intention, but it's kind of cool how that sort of seems to reflect how liminal spaces are tied in with childhoods. And this book has images like that and is literally about Celestia and Luna's childhoods, or at least adolescences. That's pretty cool. If you want something new instead of these reused renders of what we see in the movies, near the end of the book, we get these 2 graphics of these principals as teens made specifically for the book. They also reuse both of these vectors, so I guess they were expensive to make. Another cool thing that I thought was pretty cool is because this takes place when Celestia and Luna are teens, the book itself probably takes place in the late 70s to early 80s, which makes the lack of technology out at the time a pretty interesting contrast to, 2010's Equestria Girls stuff with computers and phones and emojis and all that. I find that interesting. What else I found pretty interesting are these fun statistics. This book has 132 pages. 76 of these pages are written by Celestia compared to 56 pages by Luna. And while this 20-page difference might be extreme, it kind of gets worse. Some pages in this book consist of pictures that pretty much take up like half of the page. So if we take those into account, there are 16 of them for Celestia and 8 for Luna. So if we're calculating for full pages of written content, we're gonna have to subtract the number of half pages and only add half back to the total, leaving us with 68 Celestia pages and 52 Luna pages. Therefore, we went from 132 pages to 120. So now we're left with 57% Celestia and 43% Luna. But not so fast, because for some reason, for Luna only, there's some full pages of images. It would be one thing if they had these in between Celestia and Luna's entries, which sometimes they are, but these are still going to have to be considered as Luna pages since some are literally shoehorned in between her pages, interrupting the flow of the story. And there are 4 of these, so the total for readable content is actually Celestia 68, Luna 48. Technically, there's one at the very front of the book on a pink page, implying that it's a Celestia page, but it doesn't count it as page 1, so that doesn't count. Anyways, this means that out of 116 pages of actual content, we get 59% Celestia and 41% Luna. That doesn't actually seem as bad as I'd expect a 20-page difference would make, but still, because we went out of our way to have Luna describe herself as introverted, wouldn't it technically make a better meta-narrative to have her write more pages? Since the implication would be that Luna enjoys time alone, so, she'd be more likely to internalize her thoughts more, perhaps in the form of journaling. I know that just because you're introverted, it doesn't automatically mean you're gonna journal a lot, but statistically it does. And I brought all this up because if we're not going to commit to like basic characterizations that we've established in the book, what was the point of putting this in here? In fact, there's a whole subplot I didn't even mention thus far, where Luna tries reconnecting with an old friend that she knew before high school, who pretends like she doesn't know her because she wants to fit in with the Crystal Prep kids. The worst part is that Luna's the one who calls the friend to initiate contact. In one foul swoop, this actually contradicts both how this book takes place back when phones weren't common among teens, which would reverse the praise I gave it earlier for it taking place in a different era, unless if their house had a landline, I guess. But also how Luna seems to have no problem socializing. And not only socializing, but going out of your way of taking initiative to call somebody who made it seem like they hate you for some clarification type socializing. I know introvert doesn't always equal shy, just as how extrovert doesn't always equal loud. But come on, especially if Luna claims that she learned the fact that she's introverted from her guidance counselor. Yeah, that kind of conversation wouldn't have come up if she wasn't known for being super quiet and reserved and wasn't the type to initiate calls and stuff. Other than that, let's loop back to the few points I had about what I thought would make this a good book at the beginning. So the first thing I wanted was conflict between Celestia and Luna, perhaps reflecting the whole Nightmare Moon incident. Clearly nothing like that happened in the book, so I wonder if there was anything like that in the human world at some point. Secondly, I said that it would be cool if we got some backstory to their rise to becoming principals. For that, I'd say this book succeeded since Celestia gets an important role in high school as the class president. Plus, she works closely with the principal of the school at the time. As for Luna, I mean, she still has like 3 more years of high school left, so I'm not going to be too hard on that. Thirdly, I asked for Easter eggs, which you can be the judge on that based on whether or not you choose to believe all the character connections I mentioned. Fourthly, I wanted some world building. This book wasn't great at that since there weren't many locations besides the school and like their house. This is dumb because remember, they visit an ice-cream shop. And they could have literally just as easily mentioned that this was sweet shop instead. That would have solved everything, both in terms of some consistency plus not having the hyphenated ice-cream. Lastly, I wanted some mention about their parents, which I guess technically there was. I mean, we get mentions of the parents, all right, just no specific details about them or their names, which I guess is fair since why would like 2 teen girls writing a journal call their parents by their actual names? Of course, they just write mom and dad, but still, that means that the only information we got from this book about their parents is that Celestia and Luna have had parents at some point. I'm pretty sure we could have inferred that also for the pony Celestia and Luna too, judging by how, you know, they exist and are biological entities. I mean, the whole reason I was wondering if they would talk about their parents in this book is so that we'd get more clues as to like Princess Celestia and Luna's parents might have been like, but oh well. Okay, so obviously I've had things to say about this book, positive and negative, but if I were to theoretically get a chance to rewrite this book, how would I make it better? Well, for starters, I'm confused about the title. I've commented about how it's long and complicated already, but what does this actually mean? My Little Pony Equestria Girls, yes, I get that. That's the franchise name. Wonder Colts Forever. Is that the actual title of this book with Diary of Celestia and Luna being the subtitle or what? For example, we'll take a similarly written book here out of random for comparison, right? The book series is called Diary of a Wimpy Kid, right? And the subtext is Big Shot. That's the name of the installment in this franchise. But with this book, it's like confusing because the Diary of Celestia and Luna, that's not a series. So I don't understand why they didn't just title this The Diary of Celestia and Luna and called it a day. If they were considering making this a series of books, wouldn't it still have made sense to just call this The Diary of Celestia and Luna? That's what the first book in this series did. Obviously, this isn't a huge deal in terms of the actual book's quality since that lies more within like the contents, obviously. But I still think it says something when even the conceptualization of the title is a little wonky. On one hand, I want to say that they might have titled it this way so that if this did happen to become like a huge success, they would have made more entries in the series. But then you remember this book literally ends with Celestia graduating, so yeah, no, definitely not. I like the meta-narrative of how Celestia and Luna are actually sisters and stuff, but I can't help but think some stuff involving this was only done as filler for the pages. I think one way to have fixed this issue would have been... Okay, so as a kid, I had this picture book, right? It was about a boy who lost his dog, and one side was in the perspective of the boy losing his dog, but on the other side, upside down, it was in the dog's perspective of like losing his owner, and like essentially they were talking about their own perspective of the same concurrent events, and they meet in the middle. That was awesome, and I think if they did something along those lines with this, it would have been a lot more comprehensible. Especially because there's scenes in this book where one of the sisters is all, my sister wants to tell this part of the story, so here you go.
Luna is right next to me now. She thinks it's very unfair that I get to tell the whole story. Diary, I'm going to let her finish. I really want to tell you what happened, but Luna is sitting right next to me. I told her she could write about the last moments about the friendship games. It was more thrilling than I could have ever imagined. Here she is.
Which just wastes page space. And I get that Celestia and Luna have no personalities in the movies, therefore the book needed filler like this, but if that's the case, if they did it in the format that I just described, the author could have literally just written the same scenarios in each of their perspectives. That would have been a much more reasonable way to handle this than what we ended up getting. Not even that, especially factoring how Celestia and Luna seem to always have the exact same opinions and thought process on everything throughout this book. They don't really disagree on anything, which I think one of the advantages of having a story being told by 2 different people is that they can offer different perspectives on stuff. The only thing they're not essentially clones in are things that they find out on their own and their interactions. I guess the upside of that, though, is it does make sense for these things that happen to them to happen to 2 separate people than to have everything just happen to like one of them. But anyways, the reason I read the entire back of the book earlier was because it pretty much gives away the whole plot of the book, when I think it would have been a lot more effective just to say something vague about how this is Celestia and Luna's journal filled with wacky adventures and hijinks. Otherwise, this reads like their entire school year consisted of nothing but these things at best, and an admission of how things not involving these big plot points are nothing but filler at worst. Other than that, and other like pacing and logistic issues that I touched on, I don't really have any like issue with the actual story and plot that's being relayed or anything. I really do think that the author did the best with the material that she was given. And the point of this video isn't to like knock her writing abilities over or whatever, because obviously I'm dissecting this in the perspective of an adult brony, and I'm not reading this as a little girl that's actually in the target demographic. I genuinely do think that the author who wrote this did the best with the material that she was given. Considering how she seems to be a freelancer, judging by how I can't really find anything else on her involving My Little Pony besides a couple other miscellaneous books. Still, I do think I have some ideas that would have really enhanced this book. For starters, it would have been really cool and smart to include a short epilogue passage of Celestia and or Luna as principals revisiting what they wrote as teens, perhaps reflecting on how far the school has come, or what their current feelings towards their students and Crystal Prep and Principal Cinch are, and how dynamics have shifted since then. Plus, that would have given us some character to current Principal Celestia and Luna. I mostly got that idea from this passage.
I've only been at CHS a short time, but we already have so many happy memories here. I hope when she looks back on her senior year, she thinks of the good times too, not just what happened with Crystal Prep.
It seemed like they were really hinting at something, but oh well. It's just that there were things like that that would have like taken up a reasonable portion of the book to not make so much of it irrelevant filler. They could have even done like a subplot of Cadence as a classmate
transferring to Crystal Prep, which would explain how they know each other in the movie when they go to different schools.
I think that would have been pretty cool. Though, for what it is and not what it could have been, would I recommend buying this book? Not for yourself, if you're not the target demographic at least. I guess if you have a little cousin that you want to introduce Equestria Girls to, like this isn't a bad introduction. It would probably make them pay more attention to the screen whenever the principals are on screen. Then again, if you are a big fan of Equestria Girls, this is a lesser known item that would probably be cool in a collection if you want to set it apart from others. It doesn't seem too hard to track down a copy, and they don't really seem to cost that much, so do with that knowledge as you will. And just because I said that, yeah, more than one of you guys are probably going to check this out, so hurry before it gets all taken. So, when it comes to videos like this, oh my goodness. Okay, so when it comes to videos of this caliber, as in videos where we take a look back at something that came out years ago, I like to see what the modern discussion and viewpoint of it is like today. Like, how does history remember whatever media we're looking at and all that good stuff? Well, when it comes to this book, history doesn't seem to remember it at all. In fact, one tactic that I usually use is to look whatever thing we're looking at up on Derpyburu. Since that website acts as like an archive of like every pony art / meme / screenshot, etc. in existence. Plus, it has very specific tags, and I appreciate how it catalogs stuff. So therefore, when I look up whatever it is we're analyzing, I try to look for like recurring themes or like notable fan art or whatever. I bring all this up because when you look up this book, there's only 6 posts with it. The front cover, the back cover, this render found in the back of the book, a zoomed in version of the back of the book. So far, out of the 6 posts under this tag, 4 of them have just been screen grabs of the actual book. No fan art or memes or anything along those lines. That's when I realized nobody really even remembers this book, and I'm not sure how many Equestria Girls fans even know of this book's existence. And if you must know, the other 2 posts with this tag are this and this. Okay, what a legacy to leave behind. I would emphasize the leg and legacy as a pun since, you know, these are pictures of their legs, but I'm not sure if knee down constitutes as a full leg, so that's up for you to decide if you want to say that this is a pun or not. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. If you'd be ever so gracious to support this channel, I will be forever in your debt. And I'd like to give a huge thanks to
Anthony Nash, David, Jack Ryan, Jiho Nguyen, Kurisu, Leafycune, Libby Licious, Nyx, Stupid Bitch, Taya, The Farter 29, Ultrasonic Rainboom, and Refirmed Mutt Joe.
Mwah. Other than that, go subscribe to my second channel, F-2 as well, if you want to get to know me on a more personal level, or just talk about the going-ons of my life and not necessarily like My Little Pony analysis.
Such as this video where I recount my conversation with a child murderer.
And I thought he was going to start talking about how I should avoid certain things at all costs or whatever, right? But then he goes, they think I killed a kid, but I didn't. What? Now, the thing is, if you want to be a child murderer, That's fine by me. However, if I offer to buy you food, and I do, and I'm standing a few feet away from you to talk to you, that is information that I would like to have beforehand, not after. I'm uploading on there a lot more now, so if you'd like to keep up with me, like, in between uploads on this channel, that's a great place to do it, so, yeah.
But as for this channel, yes, I'm still working on that Five Nights at Freddy's retrospective. Yes, I'm still working on that Cupcakes retrospective. And I'm also working on a huge Equestria Girls video that I'm not quite ready to reveal the topic of yet. No, it's not a Friendship Games retrospective. That'll happen later on in the year. I know a lot of you guys are excited for that, but just hang in there. That'll come eventually. I'm very excited to talk about that as well because Friendship Games, you know, I don't want to give too much away, but I think it might actually be my favorite Equestria Girls movie. And no, that doesn't mean I'm putting the Season 2 retrospectives on hold. I think what I'll do now is upload 2 weeks of the Season 2 retrospective, and on the 3rd week, I'll upload a bigger video like this one, and just repeat that pattern. But if I can't keep up with the schedule, I'm gonna need you guys to start swearing at me in the comments for me to actually keep a consistent upload schedule. Because I'm trying to take this YouTube thing a whole lot more seriously, and I need your guys' help by just kicking me in the pants every once in a while in the comments if I don't upload it forever.
But until next time, this has been F-, signing out.